Hey, Ballard Church, welcome and happy Easter. I'm so glad you decided to join us. My name is Lance. If we've never had a chance to meet before, or maybe you're new to this whole church thing, I'm so glad you took a little bit of time to celebrate Easter with us this Sunday. It's so cool. I mean, what God's been able to do over this last year, I don't think any of us would say that it's been ideal, but we're so grateful to have technology and the fact that we can do Easter digitally, that you can do Easter from your own home as we kind of hopefully hit the heels of this whole COVID-19 thing. But at this point, let's be honest, we're all done making COVID assumptions. We're all done making projections and trying to see how this thing would go. I remember a year ago, right now, we were starting to pause our in-person services. And I remember saying things like, we'll see you in a few weeks. And if you just wash your hands more, you'll be fine. I mean, what we've learned and how we've had to be flexible and adjust over this last year is something that we've all had to grow. And we've all made assumptions about when this is going to end and what it's going to look like next. And at this point, I'm just ready to let it ride. I'm just ready to see what we can do. And I'm just grateful for the opportunities that we do have to meet together like this. And it really has been one of those years where you go, this is not how I saw it going. This is not the way I thought this would go. Maybe that explains a date you went on recently. Maybe that's a class that you took in college. Maybe it's an opportunity or a job that you took and you say, whoa, this is not how I saw this going. And obviously that speaks for the entirety of 2020 and most of what we've experienced so far in 2021. But really what's interesting is as we look to the Bible, Jesus was the master of, that's not how I saw this whole thing playing out. Whether it's a conversation he had with people and he would kind of lead them along, and then all of a sudden he would come in with one of his pithy one-liners like Jesus does and change everything, and his disciples go, whoa, that's not how I saw that going. Every once in a while, he would lead them to somewhere or walk them to somewhere, and he would take a turn and heal this person and choose not to with this person and do this miracle. And everyone was sitting back, and there's, I think, so much excitement because people constantly were on the edge of their seat saying, man, how is this going to play out? Like, how is this going to go? This is going to make me sound like a heretic, but a little bit feels like a Scooby-Doo episode where like Jesus and the gang get into some hijinks, and you get into that moment where they cut for commercial and you're thinking, how are they going to get out of this one? And Jesus does another miracle or works another thing or has another conversation or says something cool, and everything begins to resolve itself. And that's kind of the cadence that the disciples got used to. And as you look through Jesus' ministry, it's amazing that in the Bible we have firsthand accounts of what happened. Of people who weren't writing it centuries later, but were looking at it firsthand and taking on the effort to write down, because they knew something significant was happening. Let's write down what Jesus was saying and what he was doing. And as you look through it, it's incredible to see this kind of pattern emerge of Jesus just doing the miraculous and changing the way people saw, really how they saw faith and the way they experienced God, and really what they thought their religion looked like. He began to turn it upside down. And towards the end of what we see as his ministry, we kind of see what happens towards the end of it. We know the ending that's coming, but it's definitely not the ending that the disciples had in mind. In fact, as we see towards the end of Jesus' life, we see him head to Jerusalem, which the disciples warned him, hey, that's maybe not the greatest idea, but he had all these followers and well wishes, and it was just this triumphant day as he headed into Jerusalem. But unfortunately, he was betrayed and he was arrested. And this didn't take Jesus by surprise, but it sure took everyone else by surprise. And in this moment, as he's arrested, the disciples are thinking, man, here comes the Houdini trick. He's going to come out with the handcuffs and be like, ha, you thought you got me. And he's going to say a pithy one-liner, but he didn't. And the disciples watched him be beaten, and they watched him be persecuted, and they watched his death sentence go forth, and they thought, whoa. This is not how it's supposed to go. This is not the way things were planning on going, and it led all the way to the point that you and I are familiar with. Even if you're not familiar with church, culturally we understand this. Culturally, this event changed history. I mean, it's the base point in which we measure our calendar. This is significant whether you're a follower of Jesus or not. Jesus was put on a cross and crucified. And in that moment, the disciples thought to themselves, what happened? Where did things go? What happened to normal? What happened to regular? What happened to what I was giving my life to? What happens to what I was committed to? and everything changed. And if you're honest, maybe that's the experience you had over this last year. Is for some, it was just an inconvenience, and it's a year you look back on, you think, I picked up some hobbies, I tried some things, and I watched a lot of shows, but for some of you, this year was really challenging. Maybe for some of you, you lost a job. Maybe for some of you, you lost a family member. Maybe you lost your sense of normal, and the days that were supposed to be so exciting, whether it be a graduation or a wedding, they came and went, and you tried to plan, you tried to maneuver, and it just didn't turn out the way you hoped it would. If we're really honest, I think some of us get to the end of this year and you think to yourself, maybe I lost a little bit of me. If I'm really honest, maybe I lost a little bit of my faith. Like, what happened to God in the midst of this? I thought it would all kind of work out in the end. I thought things would change. I thought there would be a moment where it was said, ha, gotcha, things happened and things changed. And on this side of things, we know we celebrate Easter not because Jesus died on a cross. In fact, he wasn't the only person to die on a Roman cross. Many people did that. But what he did next, 3 days later, the fact that he rose from the grave, he rolled away a stone and rose again triumphant. I mean, that is spectacular. Historically, the death rate for human beings hovers right around 100%. Like we all die. Jesus was the only one to defeat the grave, and that changes everything. If you're taking notes, here's something that I really want you to hold on to. If you don't catch much else other than this is really significant why we celebrate Easter. It's simply this: Jesus' death changed nothing, but his resurrection changed everything. His death changed nothing. His death, it disheartened people. But his resurrection, that changed everything. That changed history. That changed hearts. That changed destinies. That changed futures. That changed our relationship with God. But if you're honest and you're here today, as much as that might sound like the Easter line, and you're like, yeah, okay, I figured that's pretty predictable. We were going to talk about Jesus' death and resurrection. It's Easter. You kind of have the story doesn't really change much. And so each year you hear, wow, it's great, Jesus resurrected from the dead. But if you're really honest on the inside, you might be a little afraid to ask it out loud, so I'll do it for you. You begin to ask this question: what did it really change for me? Like, yeah, that was great for them, and the disciples Jesus appeared once more to his followers, to over 500 of them. It wasn't just like a little crew, but Jesus showed up and walked amongst the crowds once more, teaching. He's supposed to be dead. People watched him die, and it wasn't like he needed to be resuscitated. He came back to life. He was revived. This is spectacular, and it's cool for them. But what does it really change for me? And if you're honest, I think if we took a general poll, and a lot of times this was my answer too, is if you were to wonder, what does the resurrection of Jesus really mean? What does that mean for my life? Your answer would probably look like, so people get to go to heaven one day, right? That's it. Like, one day people get to go to heaven because Jesus died and resurrected. I'm not sure how it all works out or all the theology behind it, but I think what it did is it opened the doors and allowed the gates to fly open, where we could have the opportunity to spend forever in heaven. That hell, yeah, it's an option, but heaven, man, that's where I want to be. And a lot of us, we think to ourselves, if I'm good enough and if I act like Jesus enough and I come to church enough, then I can go to heaven one day. And those aren't necessarily bad things, but I think it's so much better than that. I think what Jesus did on the cross doesn't just impact our tomorrow, doesn't impact someday, but it can really impact today. That what Jesus did had a ripple effect that doesn't just impact eternity, but it impacts our present. It gives us opportunities and ramifications and a chance and the ability to lean into something today that I think is so significant. So, if you've ever sat on the sidelines and wondered, yeah, that's great, and maybe I'll kind of follow Jesus loosely as eternity insurance, like this is going to be my thing, like kind of helps me out at the end of the day, when again, we all reach that point in our life where we no longer have life, and we'd like to believe there's something after that. But today, maybe for the first time, you could lean into the fact that Jesus wanted to provide you something for today, for the here and now. And there's so many ways that we could take this. There's so many Bible examples, and I figured you guys probably wouldn't want to sit through like a 4-hour sermon, so we're going to whittle it down a little bit. And I just want to use one example of a declaration that Jesus made. And it's a declaration that if he didn't rise from the dead, would be null and void. It's a declaration that wouldn't mean much. But because he did, it has significance beyond what we could ever imagine. And if you're like me and you've maybe skimmed the Bible before and you've read through it some, this is something, even if you've been around church for a while, that you may have read right past. This is something you might have skipped right through, but to understand the gravity of what it means in light of Jesus' resurrection changes everything. And the story that we're going to be going through is in the book of Luke, and it's in chapter 4. Now, Luke was a doctor in the time of Jesus who took it upon himself to do an academic, historical recounting of Jesus' life. He interviewed people. He was an eyewitness. He was there. And this is one of the stories that he wanted to highlight when it came to Jesus and his teaching. The story takes place in Nazareth, which is Jesus' hometown. This is where he grew up. And I know if you went on Easter, you're like, wait, wasn't that Bethlehem? Yeah, but he grew up in Nazareth. And this is his hometown community. And at this point, he had gone and done some teachings and miracles. It's kind of in the beginning of his ministry career, but he definitely has some people's attention. He's done some things that are unheard of and miraculous. He says some things that are a little bit spicy and controversial. And so everybody is aware that Jesus is back in town. And it's the day that they would call the Sabbath, which they go to church together. For them, it was a local synagogue and in the Jewish tradition that they were in. And Jesus walked in and he was selected to be the teacher of the day. Let's see what Jesus taught on. So interesting. In Luke chapter 4, verses 16 through 20. If you don't have a Bible, it's going to pop up right next to me and you could read along with me. But here's what it said. He, Jesus, went to Nazareth where he had been brought up. And on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. This is an incredible book in the Old Testament. Our Old Testament, what's known as the Jewish Bible, it's the first half of our Bible, Christian Bible. And it's an incredible book that within it. And they had certain scrolls that were available to them that had certain pieces of the book of Isaiah. And one was handed to him, and he skimmed through it, and this is, in a way that only Jesus could, this is what he brought to the table. This is what he read to them. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And those all feel like really great Jesus things to say, right? Like he's going to set the blind free, he's going to heal people, he's going to bring restoration. I mean, all very Jesus things. And the one that I think we skip over the most is the very last phrase that he uses. The very last phrase that he uses is the year of the Lord's favor, which to them, they immediately knew what he was talking about. And for us, it just seems like a cool notion. For them, it brought up emotion and excitement and adrenaline to a way that we don't understand, because what he was referencing was the year of Jubilee. The year of Jubilee. And I want to get into that a little bit more, but let's just see how the story ends, and then we're going to dive into what the year of Jubilee actually meant and what he's talking about here. In Luke 4:21, he rolled up the scroll after he read it, he gave it back to the attendant, and he sat down. And at this time, when teachers sat down, that's when they really were going to bring the heat. And so everybody leaned in and pressed in. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. And his first words, he began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Amazing. Which to us, we read and go, oh, that's neat. But to them, oh my gosh, this was provocative. This was crazy. I mean, what is he talking about? Is he saying that he's fulfilling the year of Jubilee? Which for many of us, we go, that sounds neat, but I really have no idea what that means. And I really want you to understand this, because what this means could change everything for the way that you view God. It could change everything from the way that you were raised, the way you think, your notions of what God could mean or could not mean. This changes everything. And Jesus said it himself. Jesus was simply saying, I am the fulfillment of the year of Jubilee. Now, just to give you a little context, this is going to be so interesting. Y'all are going to learn something today. This is great. And the year of Jubilee is an Old Testament festival. God worked through the nation of Israel in the Old Testament to show his grace, his mercy, his love, his compassion to humankind. It was amazing. And part of that means he set a cadence for their life, which meant a lot of rituals, a lot of regulations, and also some festivals. And you think Sasquatch is dope, you want to get to Watershed, I understand the gorge is pretty, but God was the original festival thrower. I mean, this is all just stealing stuff from the Bible. And it's amazing to see there was these festivals. A lot of them would happen yearly. Some of them would happen every 7 years. And then one of them, the year of Jubilee, this one's big. It would happen once every 50 years. Once every 50 years, God commanded his people to celebrate the year of Jubilee. And he gave them 2 really important instructions on what this would mean. 2 significant things that what the year of Jubilee would signify and recognize. And trust me, this was huge. You got to think about life expectancy at that time. 50 years. You were lucky to maybe see 1 year of Jubilee in your lifetime. Maybe. I mean, this was going to be the biggest thing ever. And you're going to start to realize why. Part 1 of what the year of Jubilee meant. You ready for this? It means that it's a full year of no work. Wait, what? Yeah, right? A full year of no working. That nobody, according to God, that he was going to disallow people to work. That you were not allowed to work. And now they had a cadence in their weekly rituals that once every 7 days, it was called the Sabbath. It's something that we still believe in as followers of Jesus, that God rested as a model to us. That once every 7 days, just pump the brakes. Don't check your email. Take a break for a minute and don't produce more work for yourself. Simply what it meant. And so God said, you know how you do that once every 7 days? Once every 50 years, I want you to take a whole year and do nothing. For some of you, that gets you like itchy. You're workaholics. You love the idea of going to work. You thrive on going to work. It's where you're appreciated. It's where you're noticed. It's where you're celebrated, where you're able to use your skills. I totally understand that. For you, vacation means like I'll only check my email 5 times a day instead of 100. Like that's what vacation means. I'll only take a couple Zoom calls, but I won't take all of them. Vacation means that I'll only finish up a few reports, but I won't do all the reports. And what this truly meant, what God was commanding his people to do, was to take 1 full year and rest, to produce nothing, to set forth no obligations, to not press on for another achievement or accomplishment, and to simply rest in him, to rejoin your families, to have a time of unity and celebration unlike any other. Which if you're a practical person like me, I get it. You think to yourself, there goes the Bible, being impractical and inapplicable. Like how would you ever apply a year of Jubilee? That makes no sense. The world would come to a halt. Like how would things happen? How would we eat food, God? Like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't happen. And it's interesting, in this agricultural society, God's instructions actually allow for this. And this is fascinating to see what happens in Leviticus 25. Now, if you've ever read Leviticus 25 before, you probably read it on accident and you got bored really quick. But this is where it's so interesting to see what God does and really what he represents for you and me still today. Leviticus 25, it says this, instructing them on what this year of rest would look like. If you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year of this year of Jubilee, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce? Like, what are we going to eat? Like, how is this going to happen? Give me some practical logistics. For all of you that are practical people, the engineers out there, I get it. Let's have an answer for you. Then I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, and it will produce enough for 3 years. And you shall sow in the 8th year and eat old produce until the 9th year, until the produce comes in you, and you shall eat of the old harvest. So let me break this down really quick. This is absolutely phenomenal to see. This is the stuff that you just skip right over because it's worded in a clumsy way and you ignore it. But what God says is, listen, on this year, I challenge you to do no work. And to really prove that I'm here for you in the midst of it, the year before, I'm going to give you a harvest that's the biggest boomer crop you've ever seen. I will give you a harvest that is equal to 3 years worth of harvesting. Because it will cover the year that you harvest. It'll cover the year of rest. And it'll cover the year where at that point you're planting again, so you don't have anything to harvest at that point. So I'm going to cover all 3 of those years, and I'm going to do it ahead of time. I mean, before he used to like rain down manna daily, and that was like a neat little thing, but there's some daily trust there. I mean, what's interesting to notice in this is you got to catch this. God provided before they even did the work. Like, Like God said, I'm going to provide a system for your rest. I'm going to provide an opportunity for you to find peace before you even have faith to do it. Which for me, I'm like, sign me up for that version of faith. The version of faith where provision happens first, then I can be faithful based on what I've seen. I mean, this is so counterintuitive. In fact, in Hebrews, in the book of Hebrews, later on in the New Testament, it says faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. So there is this mystery aspect to faith, but in this, God says, I'm going to provide first, and I just want you to respond accordingly. What an incredible challenge to us. And really, this is an important thing to notice. God's provision comes before faith is required. Sign me up for that version of faith. That sounds incredible. God's provision. The masks are going to come before COVID. I mean, this is incredible. Like, I don't even understand. I mean, how is this possible? And what it means for us today, this is what Jesus is trying to acknowledge for us, is that peace is possible. What it means for us is that peace is possible. That Jesus wants to act as a means of provision and rest before you even have the faith to work for it. Before you jump through the right hoops, you do the right things, you prepare yourself the right way, that peace is accessible to you today. That contentment that's not fleeting or quickly dissipating, that's accessible today. That you have the option, the opportunity to lean into God in such a personal way that He can provide peace. And what's fascinating, it's not just a temporary peace, it's for a year and then you get back to work, but really this is a peace that's so much bigger than that. And maybe you're like me, and after a year like this, and really if you look back on most of your life, peace seems like something that's so fleeting. Seems like something that's here for a moment, here on opportunity, maybe here on a vacation. When I'm in Cancun, I feel plenty peaceful, but then when I get back, it just feels like I'm right back to it. And I don't think God here is saying you should never work or be productive. That's not His heart. But I think instead of chasing this idea of contentment or achievement, Jesus is offering us the opportunity to rest in Him. Ultimately, what it means for us today is that peace is possible. And I told you, this is a two-part thing when it comes to the year of Jubilee. So that's just part one, so you don't work for a year. Part two, you thought part one was crazy. Part two is even more crazy. Part two of the year of Jubilee is that all debts are canceled. To which, again, our capitalist society, our culture today can't fathom this. I can't even picture the idea of all debts being canceled. At this point, anybody you owed money to, the debt is forgiven. Anybody who owned land gave the land back to the original owner. Anybody who was an indentured servant of somebody else, a slave in the time, was set free. Like, everybody was able to return home. A lot of times, what being in debt to someone meant at that time, if you weren't able to pay it back, is that you would go work for them. But when debts are released, you're released to go back to your family. Generations are freed. And what God tells us the purpose of this is that there would be no generational disproportionment. So there wouldn't be a generation that just continues to get richer and one continues to get poorer. That this would be the great reset. And it sounds really cool on paper. I mean, we've been trying to figure out for generations now, like, how do we get rid of like student loan debt or some of these things? And you have the greatest minds right now trying to figure it out. So I get it. On paper, this seems like such a great idea, but there's something inside of us that just feels like it's not possible. There's no way for that to happen. Even though, isn't it true, free is such an attractive idea? Free is the most exciting concept to me out there. Am I the only one who, when something's offered for free, doesn't matter if I even want it or need it, I all of a sudden want it and need it? Isn't it true? Have you guys seen, it started as this social campaign. It just kind of took off like crazy. It's really neat. It's this thing called Buy Nothing. Have you guys seen this? Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's this group. You jump in voluntarily. It's usually community oriented. So there's like a Buy Nothing Ballard, Buy Nothing Magnolia, Green Lake, that kind of thing. And what it is you're able to just put stuff up that maybe you're not using, the stuff that's filled in the back of your closet that you feel like someone else could utilize. You just put it out there. Someone says, I want it. You put it on your front porch. Someone comes to get it. There's no financial interaction. There's no nothing. It's just you buy nothing. Things are free. You post things on there and they're free. Now, I don't get on there often because I feel like I get a little bit out of control, and some people post incredible things and some people post some pretty weird things, but it doesn't matter what it is, I just get pumped on it. I want to make an offer even if I don't need it. Like, do we need another crib in our home? No, we don't have another baby, but it's free and I kind of want it. No, I don't need that Frisbee that your dog is like chewed up and it's all gnarly and like pretty much broken in half, but it's free. So I want it. And I don't know what it is, but this opportunity of freedom, this opportunity of receiving something for nothing, it's so counterintuitive in our culture because we all understand this. This is baseline true. There's two ways to get freedom from debt. We understand this. You pay it off or grace, and it's forgiven, right? You pay it off or it's forgiven. That's the only way you get out of debt in our society is you pay it off, you work hard, you do your thing, you achieve it, or there's grace and is forgiven. And this grace forgiveness thing is so messy. It seems so easy and clean, like you just hear it's free, but there's so many ramifications of this that it gets so complicated and messy. Catch this, Jesus is trying to communicate that he is the fulfillment of debt. That whatever you would feel indebted to, whatever you would feel like is impossible or incapacitating, that you would say, I'm never going to work myself out of this. You may think to yourself, if you knew my past, if you knew my history, if you knew what I've been through and what I've experienced, then you would know there's no way God wanted a relationship with me. To which Jesus would say, I've paid it all. The debt is done. This is the year of Jubilee. Let's hit reset. Let's hit restart. Let's start from nothing. Maybe you are stuck in like a habit that you're not proud of. Maybe you're in the middle of something and there's something about your personality that you just wish you could change, but I can't stop being angry. I just can't stop with this addiction. I just can't stop with this thing. Jesus would look at you and say, freedom is feasible. And that's what it means for us today. Not only is peace possible, not only can we have rest, but freedom is feasible. Like freedom is an opportunity. Freedom, it never used to pencil, but now it actually makes sense. That there was no way for you to work it off. The Bible's very clear. There was no way for you to achieve enough to be in God's good grace, but he would look at you. He would make the first move and thus make his attitude and opinion about you abundantly clear. That he would preempt whatever you would do and look at you and say, you know what? I've paid the debt. You're free from it. The freedom is feasible. Good luck ever forgetting that. Peace is possible. Freedom is feasible. I hope that haunts your dreams tonight. Peace is possible. Freedom is feasible. I hope you just remember that. I hope when someone brings up religion, instead of all the things that faith might seem like it's against, what if you just understood that peace is possible and freedom was feasible? That the person you are today doesn't have to be the one you are tomorrow, and who you were yesterday doesn't define who you will be. That there's hope in what God provides for us through Jesus. And this is where you get to the messy end of the story. And this is where you start to understand why what Jesus said was so controversial. Why what Jesus said brought so many people, so many messy emotions, that the idea that you're telling me I can be free, it doesn't make sense. So if you flash back to Nazareth, right, where Jesus unrolls the scroll and says, essentially, the year of Jubilee has been fulfilled in me. What he's saying is it's no longer just a date and time, but as an opportunity for a relationship that I'm presenting, that is fulfilled at any moment, at any opportunity. It's not on a cadence where you have to wait for the next one, but right now, in this moment, that peace is possible and freedom is feasible, like right now, here today. To which the people listening, of course, thought to themselves, wait, the only person who could make that kind of declaration is God. And if you're trying to tell me that you're God, that makes you a heretic. And you know what? They'd be right. If he died on a cross and stayed dead, they'd be right. But dang it, if he didn't rise 3 days later. And what it does, catch this. It was amazing. Jesus was actually driven out of town after he gave this teaching in the synagogue. They drove him from Nazareth and said, never come back. You are a crazy person. And they would have been right. Except for he rose again 3 days later. Except for the fact that he got to a place where he brought some significance to the table. And this is the big idea that I don't want you to miss. This is so important. The resurrection gave Jesus the credibility that he was who he said he was, and he can do what he said he can do. If you wonder, what's the big idea? What's the importance of the resurrection for me today? What it means, what it validates, is that he is who he said he was. He's God. And he can do what he said he can do, which is forgive sins, clear debt, bring peace, bring hope, bring joy that surpasses all understanding. Gives you a hope for a future, not just for an eternity, but a hope for the here and now. Jesus' goal was never just to bring heaven one day, but to begin to bring heaven to earth, to bring heaven to the here and now, to let God's Spirit dwell in us, his followers, to give this opportunity. And if you're wondering why we celebrate Easter, it's not because he died on a cross. It's because of what it means that he rose 3 days later, that Jubilee is an option. Jubilee is a potential that we have. It says this in Colossians. I thought this was so fitting for this idea. This is Paul speaking, a theologian in the Bible. He says this in Colossians 2. You were dead because of your sins and because of your sinful nature that was not yet cut away. It was not yet paid for. It was not forgiven. There was still lingering within you something separating you from God. Then God made you alive with Christ, for he forgave all your sins. He canceled the record of the charges against you and took it away by nailing it to the cross. And because freedom is feasible, we understand peace is possible, then we can celebrate the idea of Jubilee, that this is a new concept that we can begin to bring into our vocabulary and vernacular in the moments where we just didn't see it coming. We start to understand that God knew the plan all along, that God is able to step in the midst of it. It's not just a one-day thing, but a today thing. We have an opportunity to lean in to him. I love being a pastor here and the fact that I get to hear so many incredible stories of what God is doing through people's lives. I get to meet with them in their highest highs and their lowest lows, and their challenging moments and their exciting moments. And I want you to hear a story of one of the guys I respect a ton. His name is Dustin. He and his wife go to the church here. I just want you to hear a little bit about his story of faith. Go ahead and check this out.
My name's Dustin. I've been going to Ballard Church about 2 years now. I grew up in a small town in northwestern Oklahoma. I went to a really small Methodist church, about 30 or 40 people, but outside of that, it was really just kind of my group and my family, and that was it. My parents really tried to instill in us, a pretty good connection with God and just with our Christianity. But for whatever reason, growing up, I just never had that really tight connection. I had always been a social drinker, and especially growing up, my family drank. But at some point, it just crossed the line from like this is for fun and to meet other people and be able, to have a good time to, I started doing it more frequently. There's a saying that it's like, it starts out as magic and then it becomes medicine and then it's misery. And for me, it got to the misery point really fast. After I graduated high school, I went off to college at the University of Oklahoma. I did undergraduate school there and then grad school there as well, and met my wife, Samantha. And really when I was finishing up grad school, I felt like there was just something pushing me to move outside of my comfort zone, outside of Oklahoma City. So my wife and I decided to move to Seattle when I finished grad school in 2014. So when we moved to Seattle, and we did find a church that we started going to, and it was great, but as my addiction kind of progressed, there was a ton of shame, a ton of frustration, a ton of pain built up in that. Probably in 2016, 2017, I started to cross the threshold where I was really distancing from God and just felt really, really empty and alone. I had all these things in my life that were going well. I had a job, I had a wife, I hadn't had any legal trouble. I had never, had anything like that at all. And so from the outside, everything looked great. But there were so many times when I was just in pain, and the only solution to that pain was drinking or using again to fix that and just numb everything. I just felt like I had no life, like I had nothing. Even though from the outside I had everything, like everything I had that I was told was gonna make me happy, and it just didn't. It was just me and my addiction. It took me a long time to realize like everything that I was doing was because I had this God-shaped hole within me that I was trying to fill with substances and alcohol, and that was just making things 10 times worse. And slowly but surely, I finally just let go and came to terms with, all right, if I'm gonna do this, I've shown so many times I can't do this myself, and the only thing that's gotten me to this point with doing it has been with God as my foundation, starting everything with Him. If I don't have Him, I lose everything. I'll lose my job, I'll lose my wife, because without Him, I'm not gonna be able to stay sober. And God just acted in my life and took control. I had to surrender. A big part of my story was joining a 12-step recovery program. The number one thing with that program is having God to control everything, because if you don't have something greater than yourself to rely on, if you try and do it yourself, you're gonna fail. And I tried so many times where okay, I think I can do this, I'm feeling back to how I used to, and I would fall flat on my face. But when I just fully surrendered, and that was hard, giving up, putting my ego aside and asking for help, but being met so graciously, and people wanting to help me, and God being there, I wouldn't be sober today without that. There's no way I could have done that. It's hard to believe things can be so different from where I was, but that's just God working within me. Everything that I was going through, I personally, there's no way I could have gotten through that and gotten out of that. That was 100% God working through me and just giving myself to Him. He worked a complete miracle in my life. There's no way I could have done that solo. Jesus means the foundation for my life. Having God as the basis for everything I do just bleeds into every area of my life.
What an amazing story. Oh man, thank you, Dustin, for being so vulnerable to share that and be honest with what God is doing in your life. And isn't that where it starts? For each and every one of us, the opportunity to just be honest, to understand and be okay with we don't have it all figured out. That freedom, though it might seem so counterintuitive to us, is attractive. And that the idea that a peace is long withstanding, a God who stands with us in the midst of our trials and frustrations and work ethics and failures, God, that peace is attractive. Historically and biblically, this is fascinating. There's actually no record that the Jewish people ever did the year of Jubilee. It was a decree that God put on them, and it was a challenge that He gave them. It was a mandate. He said, you have to do this every 50 years. But let's be honest, God's made a lot of mandates that humanity hasn't followed through with. And so historians and theologians think this is one of the things that they just never actually got around to doing. That provision was actually given before, that they had the incredible harvest, but they just got nervous in the midst of it. What are the ramifications? What is this going to mean? It just feels all too messy, and it was ultimately their choice. And for us today, I think the same thing remains true. That freedom, yeah, it's feasible, and peace is possible. But at the end of the day, it's your choice. That you get to walk in it, or you get to accept it. That's your prerogative. But at the same time, you could walk away and say, isn't that neat? But how heartbreaking. My heart breaks for the idea that you would have the opportunity to move forward with freedom and peace, simply walk the other direction. And God would look at you today with the opportunity outstretched, not because you earned it or worked for it. It's not because you had a big enough faith or you've done enough things or jumped through enough hoops. It's not what it's about. But He would extend the opportunity freely before you even do anything, to say, I've done the first step. I've moved the first move. I have made my opinion about you clear, that you are loved and you are cherished regardless of your history, regardless of your background, what you said and what you believe, what you did to that person, what you did in that thing, regardless of that season of your life that you wish you could forget, the things that keep you up at night. It doesn't matter. That God would look at you and say, I forgive it all. Start from nothing. No shame, no guilt. That's not where we start. Shame and guilt don't produce lasting change in someone's life. You know that. What he does is he leads with grace. He leads with freedom. And he presents us the opportunity for joy and peace. And today, that's the opportunity that I want to give you too. In light of the resurrection of Jesus, I would be a terrible pastor. I'd be a terrible friend and a terrible follower of Jesus if I didn't just extend the opportunity for you to get in on that freedom, to get in on that peace, to accept what Jesus did on the cross, and more importantly, what he did 3 days later when he rose again to defeat the restraints of death, not only in eternity, but in this life. And that now we could have a hope for today. So I want to take the next few moments, regardless of where you're at in your relationship with Jesus, I want to pray for you. And maybe you're watching today and you say, you know what, Lance, I've been curious about this for a while. And I don't know what it is, and maybe it just feels like a conscience, maybe it feels like something inside of me, but maybe this is a moment for you where you say for the first time, maybe the first time in a really long time, yeah, I want that peace. I want that freedom. I want the slate wiped clean. I want a reset button on my life. And I want to begin, I don't have it all figured out, but I want to begin to walk in the ways of Jesus. I want to be a follower of his and begin to figure out what that looks like for my life. If that's you, I'd love to pray with you. So would you set everything aside? You don't need anything around you right now for a moment. And just let's simply take a moment. Just bow your head and close your eyes with me. Jesus, I thank you. Thank you so much that you declared yourself the great Jubilee, the thing that we can be hopeful for. The idea that we don't have to be haunted by our past, but instead we can be eagerly excited for a future in relationship with you. That God, you can settle our hearts. You can settle this drive in us, in our culture, that you can finally bring a little bit of rest, of contentment to us. We've tried so many different things, and at this point we know we need you. So God, we in this moment, we accept your grace. We plead for your forgiveness, which you openly give to us. God, we're so sorry. We regret so much our past, but you don't want us to carry guilt and shame. So right now we ask for your freedom. We ask for your peace to cover it all. Jesus, would you give us the strength, the knowledge, and the fortitude to begin to follow you in whatever our next step is. God, make it abundantly clear, even if it's just coming back next week. God, would you just help us to walk in your ways, to discover what you have for us, not just for eternity, but for today. We're so grateful for you and the sacrifice you made. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. Well, if you made that decision to follow Jesus today, let me just tell you, best decision of your life. I mean, honestly, best decision you can make. And I would hope that it doesn't just end here. Come on, opening season was this week. You never see a baseball player hit a home run and not run the bases. That's the next step for you. And so I would challenge you, take the next step. And the easiest way to do it is on our website under the Next Step tabs. You can get baptized. You can go to Growth Track. You can do a number of different things just to begin to explore more about what faith means to you. And even if you've already said yes to Jesus before, those could be great next steps for you as well. I can't wait to see you next week as I kick off a brand new series called Misquoted, where we go through some of the things that we thought Jesus said that maybe he didn't. But happy Easter to all of you. Let's celebrate Jesus today. In his name, amen. God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.